In this video, I'm going to talk about on whether Amazon's interviews are fair. Okay, and this is in a context where Amazon's a commercial business, and I'm going to have a milestone-based approach that is starting with the screening rounds and then focusing on the final interview rounds. Okay, so first, for the screening rounds, it's well known that they're highly inaccurate and totally unfair to candidates, especially when someone is screening you based on impressions during a 15 minutes phone screen, right? So I believe this is, to set the record straight, I don't believe these are fair. However, you should understand the commercial side of things here. It's not viable for a company such as Amazon to invest too many resources in being so accurate while screening candidates. The volume of candidates simply is too high for this. Now, what they have been using as of recently would be those online assessments, which probably they're making the process a bit more equitable, okay? But still, the phone screening rounds are not too fair, at least not in my experience. And if you have a well-keyworded CV, you are far more likely to pass it, or if you get a referral, you're also far more likely to be successful through the screening rounds. Now, the question is on whether these correlate with successful interview outcomes, with job offers. In my experience, that's not really the case, right? Also, maybe a niche scenario, which I would like to mention here, is that some people call these interviews unfair because of the advice they're being given, or their so-called advice. So the situation is this: you ask a question such as, what should I prepare for my job interview? Or will my interview be technical or behavioral? How long should my answers be? Or can you give me some examples of interview questions? Okay, so these are pretty dumb questions. Amazon knows this very well. I mean, if you'd be interviewing people for a living, you'd know this from day one. And therefore, their answers will not be the best. Okay, so this is why some people will call this process unfair, and the information that's been provided to prepare not the most accurate, right? So it's the other way around in my experience. Now, by comparison, there are many other places where, probably they could invest more resources in the screening rounds. However, I believe this largely happens in companies of a smaller scale, which a lot fewer candidates. Okay, long story short, phone screening rounds, they're not fair. Okay, now the second part of this video on the final interview rounds. And in my experience, just as an umbrella for what I'm going to say next, is these Amazon interviews is extremely efficient at promoting the best candidates, and Amazon as a commercial business has a direct interest in investing in the quality of their hiring processes. Okay, now why does it work so well? Well, first reason is that they have multiple interview rounds. They use something what's called structured interview hiring. Okay, so the more people they assign to this process to screen a candidate, the higher the accuracy of this hiring process. And they have many programs, such as the Amazon Bar Raiser programs, stuff like that, to train people specifically to job interview candidates, right? So it's not as if they just throw 20 random Amazonians at the interviews and then call it a day. No, they actually train those people, and this is why, because the process being structured, it's also accurate. Second point I want to talk about here is that you actually interview on their terms, on Amazon's terms. Like the leadership principles would be the simplest example. In other places, they don't have these things. They don't have a custom built for purpose such process, or it's a very rudimentary one, right? So to just in order to build their hiring techniques around those leadership principles, this takes years to develop and still requires tuning up and all that stuff. Okay, so they're also really good at hiding from you what they're actually looking in the ideal candidate. Many people assume this is from the job description, this is the leadership principles, but in reality, it's not really. It's not as simple as it sounds. Right, so this is one key difference why the process is so equitable, because they're, on one hand, they're good at hiding what they're actually looking for from you, and on the other thing, they have a custom-built process to which they assign a ton of resources to ensure accuracy in their hiring, right? Now, finally, some niche scenarios for which many of candidates call these interviews unfair. Some candidates do have more insider info than others. Okay, usually the internal candidates, and yes, this is unfair, at least at first sight. But in my experience, the fact that someone knows the questions in advance in a job interview does not significantly increase their chances to pass that job interview with Amazon. All right. So long story short, if I give you the questions, which by the way, those questions aren't such a big secret nowadays, you're far from being guaranteed to pass their job interviews. But still, it's an unfair scenario, but it's rather niche scenario, right? The second thing, you could, and it does happen in niche scenarios, for candidates to make an exceptional performance to be extended the job offer, and then 1 week later to get their offer rescind it. Okay, so Amazon is a commercial business. Things change in business, and until you sign that job with them, that contract with them, you're not actually in the job, right? It's totally unfair. I do agree with you, but it's very niche. Again, the final scenario I want to talk about here, where many candidates call the process unfair, is because Amazon has a policy of not to share their rejection reasons with candidates. Actually, the policy is for legal reasons, not to share their feedback, but this is actually standard practice in many other places as well. And in my experience, the vast majority of candidates know why they failed interviews with Amazon. So long you prepare it, so long you take it seriously, you'll know more or less why you failed it, right? And also in my experience, the reasons why some people would give you for which you failed the interview are so inaccurate that you'd better be off not knowing that reason in the first place, right? So long story short, given the fact that Amazon is a commercial business, and you should keep in mind they have a direct interest of investing in hiring only the best people they can, to the extent they can, I believe they're doing a wonderful job on hiring the best candidates for their on-site interviews. As you've seen, as I talked about here, exceptions do apply, but they're rather niche. So in my opinion, the better you prepare for these interviews, the better your shot to also actually land a job offer. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.